Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, Portfolio Career Specialist, accredited Future of Work coach, author and creator of Coach Right 90, the writing programme specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. It's time for the next chapter. Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Coach Right podcast. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, recording this on Friday the 12th of September 2025. In today's show, I'm joined by Dr. Katie Best, whose book, The 10 Toughest Leadership Problems and How to Solve Them, was published by Macmillan at the end of August. Katie shares insights into the traditional publishing process, how she found and chose an agent, what decisions she made about rights, and the timeline from submission to launch. She also explains how she balances her personal and professional life with her writing in a way that didn't involve getting up at 5 a.m. But before we get into today's episode, I wanted to say a quick thank you to those of you that have reached out to let me know you're listening. Who would have thought that when you launch a podcast, one of the most humbling things is when someone chooses to listen as they go about their day? So thank you to Kerry, who listened while preparing church, and Dave, who listened at the gym. If you've been enjoying the show, I'd love to hear your feedback and where you're listening. Leave a comment or drop me a DM on LinkedIn. This week, I attended a face-to-face event held by the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, or EMCC, where I volunteer as Deputy Development Director. It was a chance to connect with peers and to discuss key topics in the coaching industry. I've been reflecting on 2 of those topics in particular and the parallels between coaching and the independent author spaces. Firstly, the vital importance of inclusivity. In coaching, we see that in terms of diversification of coaching techniques to support learning needs, in accessibility and democratisation of coaching, and of course, in encouraging and supporting a more diverse pool of coaches. As an independent author, I've always valued the diversity of the community. Our passion for words unites us, and our differences become our stories. Accessibility is important to readers too. Amazon introduced an accessibility feature to KDP, or Kindle Direct Publishing, earlier this year for ebooks. Now they've stated that the change is part of their commitment to improve inclusivity and to comply with emerging regulations such as the European Accessibility Act. One of my values is connectivity. I believe that community is powerful and we are all individually and collectively important. This topic is not one that comes with a quick fix. It's not a ticket and it will be done. It's a far broader topic than I can summarise in a brief introduction, other than to say that I feel incredibly grateful this week to be part of the narrative and to be doing my part to influence change. The second topic that everyone seems to be talking about right now is AI. Now, full disclosure, I am AI positive and have integrated the tools into many of my processes. But what I realised this week is that while I talk quite a lot about all the ways I use AI, I don't often talk about when I don't. Now, a strong user case for using AI is this podcast. So, for example, I create the transcript using an AI tool. If that functionality wasn't available, it would simply be time and cost prohibitive to produce, which, as I think back to the fact we've just talked about inclusivity, wouldn't achieve that aim. That said, my guests are by definition aware and in agreement that they're going to be recorded and that their stories are going to be shared. And you can do this with any online meeting. It's super handy for note-taking, but I find myself feeling quite differently about recording and transcribing a coaching session. I feel like part of my job as a coach is to be entirely present and to create a space that is psychologically safe, to actively listen, to challenge appropriately, and to meet the client where they are, to work with them to get to where they want to be. Having an AI tool prompt me with a question doesn't sit right with me. Having a piece of technology effectively listen in clashes with that desire to protect the space. And knowing there'll be a transcription introduces the risk to that all-important listening. But as I often say, coaching isn't about me, and I completely understand that some clients will find these things useful. So this isn't to say that I wouldn't use the tools or that I have judgment on those that do. It's more that my default is not to, and to support my clients' agency in making their choice. When it comes to writing, AI is discussed just as much. Whether and when you choose to use AI in the process and how you do ethically. Since the tools became mainstream, I've been using AI to help with research, structure, and editing. The words are all mine. They sound like me for a reason. And I found that it's not quicker or easier to try and use AI to generate content. There's been a post shared recently by thriller author Frida McFadden, which really neatly sums this up, and I'm going to share that with you. She said, I feel like every time I go onto Facebook, I see one of two things. Readers accusing authors of using AI, or authors being hurt and offended by accusations of using AI. I don't use AI to write my books. I shouldn't need to say it, but I'll say it anyway. But here's the part I don't understand. If you don't believe me and you think all these successful authors are using AI to write their books, why don't you do it too? ChatGPT is available to everyone. Just plug some idea into it and maybe give it a prompt like write an unputdownable psychological thriller with a shocking twist, and then have it write the book for you. You'll never need to buy a book again because ChatGPT can write everything you'll want to read. And then you can get it published and start making money off your amazing ChatGPT product. Brilliant idea, right? Do it. Seriously, why aren't you doing it? If you genuinely believe it's that easy, what is stopping you? The world is most definitely changing. There are parallels in the coaching and publishing conversation, just as there are across a wide range of industries. Increasingly, we're talking about the need to balance technical capability, ethical consideration, and human skills, or what some still call soft skills. How we connect, influence, and lead is different to how we would have 100 years ago, or even a decade ago. It's a challenge, and one my guest today knows all about. I hope you'll enjoy today's conversation. And here's the show. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. My guest today is Dr. Katie Best. Katie is the founder and director of Katie Best Associates, a leadership development consultancy that works with executives, senior leaders and business owners. She's a visiting fellow at London School of Economics, where she heads the MBA Essentials Executive Education Programme, and a visiting research fellow at King's College London. She's the author of The 10 Toughest Leadership Problems and How to Solve Them, which is published by Pan Macmillan in the UK. She also writes the popular leadership agony aunt newsletter, Dr. Katie. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you so much. Hi, Helen. It's lovely to be here with you.
It's really good to have you here, and I'm really excited to be sharing your story with our listeners. So let's start by telling us a little bit more about you, your coaching practice and your path to publication.
Amazing. So you've done a very good job of kind of the big headlines. So I'm a leadership coach and consultant. I do work with LSE and King's, but then the bit of my work that I think is really interesting for your audience is going to be the coaching. So as a coach, I tend to work with leaders and emerging leaders and thinking about building their confidence as leaders, but also their competence. So the skills, but also just the feeling of, yep, I can do this. It's okay. I'm allowed. I'm good enough to be here and do this leadership role. Invariably, that drifts a bit into career, because I think it always does, because often people are asking those big questions when they're in leadership positions about, is this right for me? But yeah, primarily working with leaders on their workplace and their career challenges.
Amazing. And the 10 toughest leadership problems and how to solve them. That is a lofty title. Tell us more about your book.
So it's based on the work that I've done as a coach and consultant and academic over the years, and realizing that leaders often come to me with the same sorts of challenges. It's not necessarily that these are the 10 absolutely most difficult challenges ever. These are the ones where it's got that kind of perfect balance between I see it a lot and it's really tough to solve. So those challenges. And what I find is some leaders are ridiculously lucky. The ones that cross my path, I'm not saying they're lucky because they're working with me, but they're lucky because they're working with organisations who are prepared to fund them in dealing with their challenges and overcoming issues. There are plenty of other leaders out there working for organisations that don't have that kind of budget or don't see the benefit of coaching and workshops for leaders and their problems. And so it's almost like when you've got a restaurant chain and you can't afford to go there, so you buy the cookbook and you have a go at trying to make it at home. And you get as close as you can to that. So I think my book is all about giving those tools and that way of doing things to people who haven't necessarily got the organisational support, who can then really step up and try and solve those problems for themselves. Also, to add on to that, there are some people who just don't want to own up to their company that they've got challenges. So it's kind of also a secret resource that they can use if they want to try and solve things on their own.
I love that. Just making the information accessible is such an important thing these days.
Exactly.
And I know that you've got a very compelling story as to how this book came about. So please, can you share a little bit more about that for listeners?
Yeah, so I don't know whether this is unusual or not, but I have just been desperate to write a book for decades. I can remember when I was 11 talking to my English teacher and being like, I really want to write. And initially went down the route of fiction, did an MA in creative writing, realised that whilst that was great, it was so far removed from anything I was doing in my work. And actually what I really should be doing was writing something that was to do with what I was seeing and what I was hearing every day. So initially I started thinking about writing a book for middle management because I think they really get shafted in organisations and could do with a lot more help and support. And it's almost like a bit of a dirty word being a middle manager. However, realised that whilst this is like an exciting audience and an audience I'd like to talk to, it's very hard to reach middle managers. And you're much more likely to reach this audience and a wider audience as well if you tackle something that is about leadership in general. And so seeing those common problems in the work that I was doing and then wanting to share a way of solving it, that's where the book was kind of born. It was also very much born from COVID and lockdown and me sitting in this very office that I'm sitting in right now going, what am I going to do with my time? And so all of the pieces kind of fitted together. I'm super lucky that I live in a neighbourhood with lots of people who work in publishing. So could go on socially distanced coffees and walks and run the ideas past people, had people to help me with my proposal. And all of that was absolutely fantastic because it then meant that I was really confident in the idea. And then the absolutely most geeky thing I did in the whole process was I went through the Writers and Agents Yearbook, which for anyone who isn't that far in the process yet, this is the place that's got every literary agent and every writing agent in the country and some elsewhere as well listed, and ranked them all in terms of how good they would be for me. And then started contacting them in order. And the first one that was a proper contender was the agent that I now have, the amazing Jeff Shreve at Curious Minds. And he said yes, and I was so excited. And then we worked together on the proposal for about 9 months, a bit like having a baby, and sent it out in how many years ago? 2 years ago, I think, to publishers, and got some offers and then accepted an offer from Hachette in the US. And then following that, once that deal had been done, then they sold the rights to Pan Macmillan in the UK. So this is where you get into the very complicated world of how the publishing industry works. But luckily it's all been very much in my favour with a nice advance for the book and lots of support from the publishers.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that people would really be interested to know more about writing that initial proposal. That's always sort of a bit behind a hidden curtain. So how did you go about that?
So my friend Helen Coyle, who works in the industry, said to me, don't think about writing a proposal for one specific agent. Create all these building blocks. And she gave me a list of about 12 things that I needed. So it was things like a 50-word biography, a 250-word biography, the list of chapters, the first chapter, a summary of the book, the target market, the gap in the market, like this amazing list. And she said, create all of these things straight off the bat and then adapt them for the agents that you contact, because it will feel much more efficient and you'll feel much more like you're making progress, because you'll be able to get in touch with 3 or 4 agents on one day if you want to, rather than it being, okay, I've got to start again and do precisely what they want on their form. And that was just absolutely amazing advice. And then those same building blocks form the basis of the proposal that my agent sent to the publishers when we were putting the idea out to all of them and looking for offers. So if you were going to go direct to publishers, you could do a similar sort of thing where you make these building blocks and then just pick the right ones for the particular form that publisher is talking about.
Fantastic. And I suppose the other question that springs to mind is obviously choosing the right agent for you is quite an important part of the process too. So how did you know that you'd got it right?
I think the kinds of criteria that I came up with were, because I've got an academic background and I wanted to write a book that is at kind of the cross section between being incredibly readable but being very well evidenced. So I needed an agent who was going to understand that. So one of my criteria was kind of used to working with mainstream academic books. Another one was the titles that they'd already got and whether I felt a kind of affinity, even if they weren't in the same subject matter. Did they look and feel like the sorts of books that I would enjoy reading or would have loved to write? And what other, I think I also had quite, are they accepting people at the moment? Because some of them won't be. And then maybe just another criteria around, do I feel like I would click with them? Because often they've got a bit about themselves on their profile. And so ranked all of those out of 10 and then just literally did the scoring and put them in order and then ruthlessly started going through and got lucky very early on.
I always love the academic and researcher mindset when it comes to these sorts of things. You can always tell. It's brilliant. There's always a spreadsheet involved. Yeah,
it's good. But it made me feel in control of the process. Whereas when I was writing fiction and I was just sending stuff out scattergun, I didn't feel in control. I felt really out of control. And I'm guessing that sense of having a kind of command over what I was writing and feeling like I was in the driving seat probably did help in terms of landing an agent, because they could see that I was quite confident about what I was talking about and how I was approaching them.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So you're in this amazing position where you've got this offer and now you actually have to write the book. How did you go about that from a process perspective?
I mean, it probably won't surprise you based on the story I've just told about the spreadsheet, that I was quite disciplined over the process because I didn't want it to bleed into my evenings and weekends too much. I wanted to still feel like I'd got family time. I'd recently been to a book launch just before I started writing of a friend who I'd done my creative writing masters with. And she talked about in her speech that she gave how much family time she'd had to give up, and I was just like, absolutely not. Like, a book's amazing, I really want to write a book, but I'm not sacrificing time with friends and family. So I was like, how can I make this work in a 9-to-5 structure? So I had one day a week that was always writing day, and then I had another day every other week that was like an additional research, filling it, like other activities to do with the book. So if I had interviews to do or anything like that, I tried to put them in on that day. Of course, it didn't always work like that, but having that structure in place was really useful. The other thing I did, and I can say this because the original editor that I was working with then left the publisher, is I said that I wasn't going to start writing until the September, even though we signed the deal and I think it was June. Okay. So it gave me 3 gorgeous months while I wasn't writing, but to gather all the research together and not feel like I instantly had to start delivering to deadlines. So I got a summer off in a sense, but then anything I saw, I was doing loads of reading and I would message my PA and say, can you put this in the folder for chapter 7? Can you put this in the folder for chapter 3? So then when I came to each chapter to write it, I would be able to just go, oh, here's all the references, here's all the stuff already, here's my building blocks, how do I organise it? So it meant that I could normally write a chapter, the first drafts of it at least, in about 3 days.
Fantastic. And roughly how long is your book?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's like what it says. Here's the book. Here's an advanced copy of it. So it's sort of this is like a cheaper galley copy, basically. But you can see it's a sort of standard thickness. Yes. So yeah, standard sort of print size. Again, it'll be slightly different in the proper version, but it's So it's whatever a book like that normally is.
Yeah, it looks sort of 300 odd pages, I would guess.
Yeah. In this version, it is 289. Yeah, look at you. You're very good.
Like, anyone would think we read lots of books.
Yeah.
So you've got a very structured approach. You're cracking through your first draft. How then the next step is editing. How did that go for you?
So I decided, my editor was amazing, and she was like, what's going to work for you? And I was like, what is absolutely not going to work for me is me writing it all and then sending it all to you at the end and you going, we've got to do it again. So we did it where I sent her 1 chapter for the first review, 2 chapters for the second review, and then only when I was confident did I then say, right, now I'm happy to write the rest of the book. Because so much of it is about the editorial style, and like they know that much better than you will. You're trying to fit within a particular imprint. It needs to have a particular tone, use headings in a certain way, etc. And what I found really good was, because I was part of a big publisher, they could send me any books that they thought might be useful. So, for example, she'd be like, this needs to be a bit more humorous in this bit. I'm going to send you this book, and they've done a really good job of that. Read chapters 3, 5 and 7 and you'll see what I mean. And that was fantastically helpful. I think it's just really brilliant to have an editor who feels like they're on your side, who wants it to be a really good book, but who also doesn't nitpick, because that process can happen later on when you're doing the copy editing, etc. Sorry, I've wandered a bit on that, but
no, I think it's really important, because I think when we talk about editing, people think of them as very defined steps, don't they? They kind of go, you write the book, then you edit the book, then you publish the book. But actually, in reality, when you're doing it, you write a bit, you edit a bit. There's different stages of editing. I think it's quite important for people to understand that it's not kind of like a ticket and it's done and move on to the next step. There's a bit of bleeding between the lines, kind of thing. Yeah,
and actually that's one thing I should have said, that I didn't want to write a book if I hadn't got an agent, because I was aware of how much an agent could leverage you, could get you in advance, and could be an extra really useful voice in the mix. That meant that I didn't ever have to write the whole book before selling it. All that I'd written at the point of sale was the introduction and the first chapter. So just to clarify that, because some people listening might think, hold on a second, how come you then had to write the book? And that's what the process looked like for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important call out. And the process from kind of editing to publication, again, talk us through the next few stages.
Yeah, well, what I couldn't believe was that I had to submit it. I think it was almost exactly this time last year. So we're recording this in July. And I think, almost to the day, this was the day that my deadline was, that I had to deliver the book. And then it's coming out in August 2025. So about a month after we're recording this. And that's all editing. So there's like 3 months of intense editing at the beginning. And then it's copy editing and another round of copy editing and another round. And then someone else gets it and then someone fact checks it. And there's so many stages. So I remember when they first laid out the timelines, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm doing all the hard work in the first year and then they get to sit on it for a year. And then I very quickly realised there's definitely no sitting on it going on whatsoever. There is so much work going on.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? All the other things that have to happen after you've written the end, either metaphorically or literally.
Exactly. And that just felt really funny, but now I get it. And then it makes me think, wow, when it's a book, you know, so when people were writing books about COVID, or when they're writing books about the Trump administration and they're getting them out in like 3 months, how are they doing it?
And I think it's a really important difference. So what you probably find is a lot of those books are being self-published because the publishers'
that's true, isn't it? Yeah.
They obviously have their own teams and they have their own internal processes, like any other organisation. You know, if you're a big organisation, things are structured in a certain way, and if you're a small independent organisation, things are structured in a different way. And I think that's quite an important differentiator too.
Yeah.
I know the other thing people often ask me about how the traditional world works is around rights, and you've touched on that very slightly already with the rights being bought by Macmillan. How does that work in the traditional space, and how does it work specifically for you?
Yeah, so when we got the offer from Hachette, Jeff, my agent, said his advice was that we gave them the English language publishing rights, so they would be responsible for all the English speaking territories, but that we held on to the international publishing rights. Part of the motivation for that, if I recall correctly, was because of my affiliation with LSE. And so the London School of Economics has got such a strong brand name globally. He felt that we could probably generate more revenue by selling those separately. So it's already being sold in simplified Chinese, it's being sold in Turkish, which my friend who's Turkish was very excited about. And then, you know, more will come in as the book launches. Lots of countries, publishers will wait to see that it lands okay. So we're expecting kind of more offers to come in later on this year.
Yeah, again, I think that's just really important to call out. It's not necessarily a deal or no deal. It's choosing it with a business head on of where the rights sit most naturally and what you want to control and what you want to sell at what time.
Yeah, and I think that's where an agent is super helpful, because I still look at the contracts and go, I don't know what most of this means. So, you know, have even done the thing of running it through ChatGPT and going, can you explain to me what does this clause mean? Because I don't know what these words are. There's lots of very specific publishing terminology that, you know, I wish I could give you an example of it now, but it's just gone straight out of my head again because I thought I'm never going to need to know that probably ever. But an agent is really helpful for navigating that, and because they get a cut of what you make, it's in their best interest as well to get you the best possible deal. So you feel very protected by that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are clearly a highly organised individual, which resonates with me quite a lot. What tools or technology tips have you got for people that are just starting out in the process?
So without doubt, use referencing software. If you're writing the kind of book that is going to use references, make use of one of the major referencing softwares. So I used EndNote, which is because I get that free through LSE. I think I get that free, fairly sure. But then there's other ones like Mendeley, which are naturally free, and all sorts of others. And do that from the very first stage, because I got about a third of the way through and went, yeah, I hadn't really thought, and I should have known this from writing a PhD and writing academic papers, but in my head it was in a different bucket, and then had to spend a few days taking the references that I'd already got and importing them. But it just makes that process at the end, because the publisher will have a very specific way that they want the references displayed, and if you don't do it right, you will get it back. So that saves days and days and days if you can automate that. Other technology, I didn't really use AI because my writing finished, as I say, last June. And I think for that year of writing, I was head down, and I only really started thinking about the benefits of AI post-writing. So I think a couple of times I did ask it with chapters where I was like, I'm just missing like an idea and I don't know what it is and I can't bring it to mind. I did ask it, can you make suggestions around blind spots that I might have on this chapter and things that I should have covered that I haven't. And so it was really helpful from that point of view. It didn't go anywhere near the writing. I think for me, it's also too seductive that if you get AI to write it, you then think, oh, that's really good, I'll leave that. But it's not you, it's not your voice. And you can, I'm getting much more sophisticated in my use of it and training it in a way that it does sound a lot more like me. But I still have that nervousness and that kind of thing that people are buying my voice. They're not buying the AI version of my voice. So wanting to kind of be faithful to that.
Yeah, I use it very similarly in my process. It's they call it Copilot in Microsoft for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, it's there as someone to bounce an idea off rather than necessarily to copy verbatim. For me, in my process, for sure. And what did you learn that surprised you throughout all of this?
I think a big learning point was you can write a book and still have a life. Because I was really nervous the year before going into it. Really nervous of the year that I was going to have before I went into it. Is this year going to be a write-off other than book writing? But realising that if you were structured, you could absolutely write a book and have a job and have family and friends time. So that was a nice learning, and it made me feel, I'd do this again, rather than it having been really torturous. I think also how willing people are to be interviewed. It's really not like, I got some really great people who were prepared to talk to me. So, CEOs of big marketing companies and CEO of a defence organisation, a dame who'd worked in the education industry and was really highly respected, a really big name in the Metropolitan Police. So all of these kinds of people, they're like, yeah, definitely, I'll talk to you. I'm happy to give an hour to give thoughts. And I think that was an amazing discovery that you can, if you're writing a book, it does open doors that might not necessarily open quite so easily otherwise.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get people talking about things that they can talk about in a book or about books. Everyone's like, yes, I would love to do that.
Exactly. So that's been really nice. And I also learn, or rather relearn, how good Starbucks is for writing for me. So, but on a more serious note with that, I realised writing at home was going to be tricky because there's too many distractions. So I designated a particular Starbucks, a 20-minute walk from my house, that's really new, very swish. It's very quiet. I think it will probably close down soon. And that was my writing space. And it meant that when I walked in there wasn't that instant behaviour of switching on my email, checking my WhatsApp. It was like, no, I sat down, I turned on my computer, I didn't connect to the internet, and I wrote. And that reminder that you can kind of have that brain trigger of, this is a space where I go to do just this activity. That was a really good learning, and that's something that I will definitely carry forward if I write another book, and I still use that coffee shop when I've got a big project on.
Yeah, so it's a really, really good piece of advice.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be Starbucks, but I don't feel guilty going in there and nursing a coffee. Yeah. Whereas if I go to like the lovely Independence near where I live, which we have some phenomenal ones, and that's where I would go to socialise or work for an hour, I feel too guilty to just sit there with a giant coffee all day.
Yeah, no, I get that. And do you think you will write another one?
I'd really like to. I've got a proposal out with my agent at the moment for a book that I might co-author with somebody. I am not saying who because I haven't got their permission to say so, but if that happens, it'd be really, really nice to work together. I've still got that desire to write the book about middle management as well. And I think the challenge for me was, and this sounds strange, but kind of, what is the title for that book? Because if people don't self-identify as middle managers, how do you sell that book? But because I've now got publishers I can have a conversation with rather than going in cold, I feel as though we might be able to find a way around that. I've got voices I can talk to rather than it just be me at home going, is anyone going to want to buy a book about middle management? So I think I'd like to come back to that as well.
And I know as we're recording this, we've got about 5 or 6 weeks until the book is launched, which is super exciting, but it will be available by the time this is released. What's happening between now and launch day for you?
Very weirdly, I'm going on holiday. It was organised long before the book launch date was set. And my partner's got a sabbatical from work. So we're doing that. But everything's geared up in advance. So it's lots of recording podcasts, writing some articles, pitching for op-ed pieces. Lots of it's being handled by the publisher, actually. So they've got my WhatsApp details. And if anything comes in urgent in terms of publicity over the summer, of course, I will take a break from sitting on the beach in San Sebastian and instead go and record an interview or something. And that's fine. I'm aware that will happen. I suppose right now where my attention is focused is on things like LinkedIn posts that promote the book without being too salesy, talking to my newsletter, following around the book. It's those kinds of things. What I would say is it feels like a never-ending list of jobs. There is the risk that you never stop with that stuff. So I think that much more than the book writing, where it's the book's done and then you write a book and a book is finished. This is a never-ending thing that you could just keep going with. So I think it's about also drawing a line at some point and going, I've done enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good advice. And actually, I suppose that would lead me to the last question, which is what other advice would you give coaches? You've touched on a few things already today, but those that are aspiring to write their first book, what's the number one tip you would give them?
Yeah, I mean, the number one tip I think is obvious, is the kind of make sure you've got your topic really clearly in mind and make sure someone else isn't already doing it. Because nothing's more frustrating than going a long way down the process and then someone going, oh, if you just search slightly differently, someone's basically written that book already. And I think thinking about the end user, so the reader, I do sort of think about it as an end user though, when you're thinking about a coaching book, because it's going to become a practical tool probably that is actually going to be used. What are they going to derive the most benefit from? And so kind of removing the ego. I mean, I say this in all honesty, because I was I want to write a book and that's very much ego driven, but then to actually get that over the line and to get something that you can sell, you've got to flip that around and think about what is actually going to represent good value to someone, what's going to make them put their credit card details in and buy that book.
Yeah, for sure. Great advice. Thank you so much. That's been absolutely fascinating. And I know that you've really got into detail on quite a lot of the things that people are really interested to know more about. And most importantly, your own experiences of those things. Just to finish off, please tell listeners where they can find you, your services, and most importantly, your book online.
Yeah. So on LinkedIn, you can find me at Dr. Katie Best. My website is katiebest.com. And if you want to sign up for my Agony Aunt newsletter, that's www.katiebest.com/dear-Katie. So a bit wordy, but I'm sure in the show notes, there'll be links to these things as well. And then also I always love hearing from people. So if anything we've talked about today resonates and you want to be in touch, probably the best way is via direct message on LinkedIn. And I check on that on a very regular basis, so we can start a conversation there.
Fantastic. And I highly recommend your newsletter. I am a subscriber and I thoroughly enjoy reading it. Thank you so much for your time, Katie. It's been brilliant.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen, that's O'Neill, Oneill, or on Instagram at Helen O'Neill Coaching. I'll see you for the next chapter of Coach Write.